it's important to me to connect with girls and women, almost as an example of, this is possible.
Right.
If I hadn't created this idea in my head, I may not be here. But this, people like me are real, and you can be whatever it is you want to be.
Right. From Fiore Communications, it's How I Got Here, a show of inspiring stories from Tallahassee area leaders, business owners, and neighbors, all the challenges, opportunities, inspirations, the twists and turns of life that led them to where they are today. Everyone has a story worth telling, and I am really grateful that we get to bring a few of them to you. I truly have been changed by my conversations with these amazing people, and I'm confident you will be too. I'm Dave Fiore, and in this episode, I speak with Sha'Ron James, Government Affairs Consultant of Counsel at the Gunster Law Firm. Sha'Ron is a tireless advocate for women and girls, specifically working to provide opportunities and bridging gaps of inequity. As a child, she saw firsthand the difference education can make growing up in two worlds, one stable middle-class home and an emotionally supportive but financially vulnerable home. This duality stirred a passion and empathy for the community that has driven her professional and volunteer life as an adult. Sha'Ron was on her high school homecoming court and was prom queen, but not by being the most popular kid in school. She said it was her first experience with political strategy as she built strong alliances among different groups. Sha'Ron says those same strategies still work for her today. She is an attorney, worked for 3 Florida CFOs, and spent over 3 years protecting Floridians as our insurance consumer advocate. And in 2020, she created the Impact Companies in its first project, Impact Foods, which is now serving locally sourced fresh foods around town from high-tech vending machines to those who may lack access to healthy food. Sha'Ron is also a community volunteer and has held significant leadership positions with the Greater Tallahassee Chamber of Commerce. A mom who loves to travel and support FAMU football, Sha'Ron says everything she does is to provide opportunities for her daughter. We started talking about her early years, splitting time between Pensacola and Orlando.
So I was going back and forth, but not like, how families do it now with, 2 weeks on and 2 weeks off. Because of the distance, I
Right.
would spend every summer and every, Christmas holiday and every other holiday. It was kind of like that, the old school 80s divorce schedule.
Right. So I guess Orlando's not the worst place to be in the summers and holidays,
No,
right?
Orlando was great. And my childhood, it really, in a lot of ways, shaped how I am and who I am because of that arrangement. So my mom, like as I mentioned, was from Pensacola. She's passed on now.
Okay.
And my dad was from Orlando. My parents met. My dad attended FAMU and was a teacher, and his first teaching job was in Pensacola, which is where he met my mom. So they married, they moved to Orlando, they were married for a number of years, and then they divorced. And so in the summers, I spent the summers with my dad, who was by that time a principal in Orange County. And what I saw with him was much different than what my 10-month upbringing was like in Pensacola. My mom didn't go to college, high school diploma. She had a number of different jobs, and so it really in a lot of ways shaped what I consider my duality and my my passion and empathy for community. Because I was able to see really and live between two worlds, a very stable middle-class family in Orlando and a stable but not emotionally and mentally stable but not financially stable upbringing in Pensacola.
Did you see education as being the difference in those two lifestyles?
Absolutely. And it was apparent not just from my parents, but also my grandparents were very much a part of my upbringing as a child. And my grandmother was, for most of my mom's upbringing, a stay-at-home mom. My grandfather was a contractor. When my mom and her sister got older, my grandmother began doing what they called days work. It essentially was a housekeeper
Okay.
for a family, a physician. And so my idea or my reality of summer camp was spending time with my grandmother at the home of this physician's family. And so again, that was just for me a very clear indication of what education can do and the difference that it makes in your life.
Right. Well, we'll get into it in a little bit, but you got a lot of education.
I do.
You do. Yeah, we'll get into those details. So I did dig around a little bit, and I found out that you were on the homecoming court at Pensacola High School.
I was.
Right.
I was.
What year of school was that?
That was 1992. I graduated from high school in 1993. So
you were junior year?
my senior year,
Okay.
I believe.
Were you somebody who enjoyed that kind of social? Were you kind of a social butterfly kind of person?
I was not. And so what's funny, and the reason why I kind of hesitate on the year is because I was on the homecoming court, but I also, so I was just on the court, didn't win. But that same year, I believe, I know my senior year in high school, I did win prom queen.
Oh, wow. Congratulations.
I know,
There you
right?
go.
So that wasn't, I was.
So if you weren't super socially connected, what do you contribute or what do you attribute that to?
So that's a great question because I kind of talked with my daughter about this recently. For me, in retrospect, I think it was the early days of political strategy and I'll explain what I mean by that. So I was in the IB program. And so when people hear that now, they probably didn't know that IB has been around for that long.
I had no idea, yeah.
Yes. So I was in the IB program at Pensacola High School. And Pensacola High School's IB program, I think, is very much like the IB program here, where it was a part of the decision to place it at Pensacola High School was to add some degree of diversity to a school that would otherwise not be as diverse.
Okay, so you weren't zoned for Pensacola
I was
High
not
School.
zoned for Pensacola High School.
Okay.
And most of I would say 99% of the kids that were in the IB program weren't zoned for Pensacola High School. But Pensacola High School was, I'm pretty sure Pensacola High School was a predominantly black high school.
Okay.
And so when I mentioned the political strategy, what made me somewhat unique was that I had a lot of friends in the IB program who were white, but I also had the support and the friendship of the majority students who were black.
Okay.
So when you add that support,
that's a good formula,
that's
right?
That's a good formula to become to get on the homecoming court and
Right.
become the prom queen. So
Well, there you go.
It worked for me, but I never set out for that. It really kind of was always a part of my leadership. So I was always a part of student government and was a student leader, not a social butterfly. Very much like how I am now.
Right. So what started your interest in leadership at the high school level?
It all goes back to, I think, the foundation in the IB program. One of the things that I've realized, recently, which is I think I have somewhat of a unique gift in terms of being able to see like trends and gaps and patterns.
Okay.
And so I've always focused in on, even then, inequities and just contrast. And so as a student in the IB program, those inequities and the contrast, and even when I talk about, my own upbringing.
I was going to say that kind of mirrors that, right?
Yes, it was it was always kind of at the forefront of my mind. And so as a student at Pensacola High School, those inequities were really clear. And so I just felt the need to kind of be a leader and shed a light on the inequities and also advocate for changes and solutions and things that needed to happen in order for it to be better.
Right. Do you think you had some success in high school doing that?
Yeah, I think so. An example is, and again, this was probably 10th grade or 11th grade. Again, the program is an international baccalaureate program, and going through all these very rigorous courses, and I felt like the students were not being exposed to Black history and African American authors, and so I went to the program administration and told them about that, talked to them about it, and ultimately they put a library together in our student lounge of it was probably about 25 to 30 books, and they let me pick which ones
Oh, nice.
that they ordered. I think I had some success with that. I even had a classmate of mine reach out to me last year after the murder of George Floyd. A white classmate emailed me to thank me for how I responded to her, what she personally, I think, deemed in retrospect as racism. She made a statement or asked a question and I had no recollection of this. This was all in the email that she sent me,
Right.
of basically saying, if you all don't like it, just go back to Africa. And apparently
That's pretty straightforward.
It was very straightforward. And
Right.
apparently I responded to her in a way that helped her understand why that was racist and inappropriate. And she, again, it must have had an impact on her so much so that she remembered it and felt the need to say that, since that time, she understands and why I responded to her that way, and that it was a product of her own upbringing, that she was mirroring and parroting what she had heard, and apologized for it. So to me, that was very impactful to me to have someone many years later come back to me to say that something that I said to them was impactful.
Yeah, that's awesome. All right, so after high school, you did start your path toward many degrees. So you first earned a bachelor's degree in economics from Florida A&M University, then a master of public administration from Syracuse, then your law degree from University of
Yes.
Florida, and then plus you earned an advanced certification from Stanford.
Yes.
So as we said, those are a lot of degrees. And you've talked about seeing the importance and the value of education, what a difference that can make in your life. I'm just curious because that is more than just going to college and getting a degree. That's, you're really setting yourself up for a lot of options professionally. So I wondered, did you have a education and career goal from the beginning, or did it just sort of evolve over time?
So it evolved somewhat over time. So when I started at FAMU, my initial goal was to, and this is in my senior memory book, I wanted to be an international corporate lawyer. Interestingly, when I was growing up, I never knew a lawyer. I just never met one or interacted with one. It was just, I think, as I mentioned before, in my mind, that was a career goal or a career that would be, kind of transformative. It would be.
Why did you think that?
Because I think from my reading and my, watching of TV, lawyers always seem to be, they always had some kind of impact, and their standing in the community was was always really solid, and they were respected. And so I think from a values standpoint, lawyers represented what I valued. And so I, you know, and frankly, I'm not good at math or science.
Neither am I. That did cut down my career options somewhat.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. Although my dad wanted me to be a pharmacist.
That does require some math and
Yes,
science.
yes. So much so that when we went to orientation at FAMU, they had each school and college. If you were going to, this school or college, stand up and go with, the person, the host. And they called the FAMU School of Pharmacy. And I was still sitting down, and my dad looked at me.
Like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
They do have a great pharmacy
They
school
do
there.
have a great pharmacy school.
But so economics. I mean, there are numbers involved in economics.
Yes.
But not equations so much, I guess, right?
Right. And that wasn't a direct, path. So I wanted to go into international corporate law. I thought I was going to double major in business and French, dropped French after, a semester or two, and found economics because it really, I think, I wasn't really familiar with the subject area, but after taking the economics course, I realized that it was more of a higher level understanding of business and the economy, and so that's where I landed. So then I was kind of mentored by a professor at FAMU that was really advocating for me to get a PhD. Kind of went back and forth with that, which is why I ended up in a master's program, because after graduating from FAMU, and I kind of zoomed through FAMU. I graduated from FAMU in 3 years.
Wow.
Yeah. And so I decided to take some time off, figure out what I wanted to do, and a master's program would give me an opportunity to decide, law or a graduate or a PhD.
Okay.
And then I realized that there wasn't one thing that I wanted to be an expert at and teach or study or research for the rest of my life. That just sounded awful to me.
Needed a little more variety.
I did. There were a lot of things I was interested in, but nothing
dedicate
my whole life to. So then I pivoted back to law school, and a part of that too was just that I wasn't ready to go to work. I mean, go to law. Go, and I still tell people that, students, if you're not ready, you don't know exactly what it is you want to do, stay in school.
Yeah.
And so when I finished my graduate degree, I applied to one law school, and that was the University of Florida. And thankfully, I was blessed to get in, and the rest is history.
Right. So your first job after law school was hanging out your own shingle, right?
My first job after law school was teaching at FAMU, and to supplement my income, I hung my own shingle.
Gotcha. So you were an adjunct professor?
I was, yes.
And what, you were teaching law?
I was teaching in the public administration political science track.
But then you decided to join a local firm at some point after that?
Yes. During that time, the real estate market was booming. And so the practice that I had developed over a couple years, and I was also doing some real estate investing on my own. And so the practice that was really growing for me was real estate law. And I started doing real estate closings and clearing title and, transactional work. And that, like I said, that practice really developed and grew. And so I took that practice that I had and joined a local firm, Messer Caparello.
Right.
Yeah.
And how was that?
That was great. So that was really my first experience in kind of law firm life. And I worked with some great lawyers, great attorneys at Messer Caparello and I was there for probably about 5 years. But towards the end of my time that's when the bubble burst. And my practice shifted from a transactional real estate practice to more of a litigation adversarial practice, which didn't really fit with what I was interested in. I never really liked the adversarial trial type of law. And
Right.
so I began, trying to regroup and figure out what I wanted to do. And it was also during that time that I had my daughter, who is now 13. And so I decided to leave private practice and go into state government.
Okay. Yeah, and you joined or you became the insurance consumer advocate for the state of Florida, right?
Eventually,
Okay, so there was something before
there
that?
was something before that. So I joined the Department of Financial Services and worked for then CFO Alex Sink. And when I joined as the assistant director of a little known division, the Division of Rehabilitation and Liquidation, which oversees the takeover of insurance companies that become financially impaired or insolvent. I started there and eventually became the director of that division. CFO Jeff Atwater was elected, and shortly after that, he appointed me to insurance consumer advocate.
Okay. So what is that job? I didn't know that job existed. What did you do?
So, as insurance consumer advocate, the simplest way to explain it is that I am the lawyer and I was a lawyer and lobbyist for insurance consumers.
Okay.
So, any insurance related matter that came before the Office of Insurance Regulation or the legislature or the CFO's office, I was able to intervene on behalf of the public to either support or weigh in on rate increases. So I did that, or legislation. I was actively involved in advancing pro-consumer, pro-insurance consumer legislation.
So you weren't helping individual people, but you were representing consumers and people as a whole.
Absolutely.
Like who's
Yes.
standing up for Floridians
Yes.
if the insurance company wants, or in the insurance industry wants to do this or that.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. And it was across all lines of insurance. So property and casualty, health, workers' comp, long-term care. So it was a pretty vast industry and a lot of issues that came up.
Right.
And one of the first things I did was I really wanted to hear from stakeholders. And so I spent several months basically traveling the state to hear from seniors and folks that lived in South Florida, people that owned property along the coast, military families, just a wide variety,
Yeah.
which interestingly is how I landed on in finding an organization that I'm very much a part of now, which is the National African American Insurance Association.
Right. You're the president now, right?
The president of the Florida chapter.
Okay.
Yeah. And so when I started this process of identifying stakeholders to talk with, and as a part of what I consider the advocacy process, you always want to be able to have input from the people that are actually affected. And so
Right.
I started searching for, African Americans in insurance, if there were any groups that I could go and talk with, again, to kind of build this army or this group of stakeholders that could help push our pro-consumer issues.
Are you talking about agents? I mean, people who work in insurance?
So that's a great question, because what I found was the National African American Insurance Association is an association of all African Americans in the industry. So agents, adjusters, C-suite folks, across the board. And so what I also found was that there wasn't a chapter in Florida. The organization didn't have a presence. And so we founded a chapter in Florida now, I think about 4 years ago.
Okay. Has the response been good? Have people been interested in being part of that organization?
The response has been great.
Okay.
And it is a statewide chapter. So we have folks in North Florida, Central Florida, and South Florida. And our membership base again, runs across various types of professions in the industry. Again, through my work, what was apparent to me was an inequity, a lack of diversity in the insurance industry as a whole. As an insurance consumer advocate, I had the opportunity to meet with, company owners, officers, vice presidents and presidents, and I didn't meet anyone that looked like me. And so that, again, was apparent and was something
In
that
your skin color or your
in
or
my
your gender, both? Yeah.
both skin color and gender.
Okay.
And to me, that was a problem, and is something that needs to be addressed.
Right. Then your next career move was to leave the state and go back into private practice.
Yes,
Right. And you now are an of counsel shareholder with the Gunster Law Firm.
I am.
Okay. So what does the of counsel part mean? Does that mean you're not full time or you're like a consultant, or what does that mean?
That means that I practice law, but I'm also a government affairs consultant. So I practice law and I'm a lobbyist. So my time with Gunster is split between government affairs and lobbying, and the traditional practice of law.
So you wear two hats. You're a registered lobbyist and you're an attorney.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And so the of counsel part kind of signifies the lawyer, the traditional legal work that I do,
Okay.
which is more on the regulatory side. So I basically represent businesses before state agencies. So licensing or getting applications approved through, various agencies like the Department of Business and Professional Regulations or the Office of Insurance Regulation.
Okay. Did that seem like a natural next step for you in your career to do this?
Yes, especially because I wanted to stay in Tallahassee, and so given all of my experience and of course education, to me it was just a natural shift in my work from a former regulator to representing businesses.
And because one job is just not enough to do at a time, in May of 2020, you also, in the height of the pandemic shutdown, I'll add, that you launched the Impact Companies.
Yes.
Right? And the first project under that umbrella is Impact Foods.
Yes.
So how did that happen, and what is the company all about?
So Impact Foods the Impact Companies as a whole is a mission-driven social impact organization. I've had a long-term interest in social impact investing and entrepreneurship. So as a thread that runs parallel to everything else that we've talked about, I consider myself somewhat of a serial entrepreneur. I've had a couple different small businesses and have been involved in various types of investments. And so I wanted to create and develop an organization, a company that could be impactful in Tallahassee to address some of the social challenges that we are facing. And so I done some research actually for a couple of years looking at various projects to jump into. I looked at, the need for a quality daycare in South City. I looked at healthcare. I looked at a number of different projects. And so during the pandemic, right before the pandemic, there was a lot of discussion in Tallahassee about food deserts and food insecurity.
Right.
And so I started doing some research and my wheels started turning and essentially asking the question, this is what I do in my spare time. How
Yeah, you have so much spare time.
Yeah.
Is that right?
How can we address food insecurity? There was a lot of discussion about traditional grocery stores not wanting or being able to be in certain communities for a number of reasons of which I understood. And so I started doing research on this topic, and that's when Big Brother kicked in. I was online doing research and flipped over to Instagram and started, scrolling through Instagram, and there was an ad, a sponsored ad from a company called Byte Technology.
Okay.
And Byte Technology manufactures swipe, grab, and go kiosks. And that was my introduction to the technology behind these kiosks. And from there, I developed Impact Foods. So
Okay.
Impact Foods owns and operates swipe, grab, and go kiosks. You essentially swipe your credit card to open the door. You're able to access the food that's on the inside of the machine, and we offer healthier, fresh food options in our kiosks.
Okay.
We now have 9 kiosks that are operating across the city, and the long-term mission and goal.
I'm sorry, let's go back. So where are they located? I know there's one at the TCC Center
Yes.
downtown because I've actually seen that one.
Yes.
I was speaking to a Flagler class that Matt Thompson does on
Yes.
podcasting.
Yes.
And we were waiting for that class to start. And
you saw
I saw it, and so I saw somebody go through the process and grab some food. I'm like, what are they doing? That is really cool, but I didn't really understand what was going on. So,
Yes.
yeah.
So we have 4 locations in downtown Tallahassee. The TCC Center for Innovation, the Plaza Tower condominiums,
Okay.
Tallahassee Center condominiums, and the residential community, the new residential community in Millstream at Cascades Park. We also have 2 that are a part of Tallahassee Memorial Hospital, one at the TMH Bixler Emergency Room, and one at their Northeast Medical
The emergency room?
room. We have one at Leon County Schools Admin Building, and one at Barrington Park Condominiums off Thomasville Road.
And where does the food come from?
So we source all of our food, our ready to eat food, locally, and so I say that because Impact Foods, there are 2 general kind of concepts. One is a smart cafe, which is ready to eat foods like salads, wraps, sandwiches. And then there are micro groceries, which we're working to stand up now, which is the machine is stocked with fresh food, staple food items like milk, cheese, butter,
Okay.
etc. But our swipe, grab, and go smart cafe is sourced pretty much all locally. Social Kitchen is one of our primary vendors, Red Eye Coffee, Tally Kombucha, Flex Foods. And so we work with local companies to fill the machine with great food.
That's great. Did you have to figure out the logistics of all of it and how they get refilled and how and just the whole business model part of it?
Yes. But one of the things that really struck me about Bite Technology is that that particular company had 500 of the kiosks operating in the state of California. And they sold off their owner-operator side and now are only distributing the machines. But they provide and have provided a lot of insight in building the business model.
Okay.
And so that's been very helpful.
So
but
you didn't have to invent it, but you
didn't
had
have
to implement it.
Didn't have to invent it,
Right.
but definitely had to implement it and make it work for here and also for me, given the fact that I have quite a few other things going on.
It had to be something manageable time-wise,
Yes,
right?
Absolutely.
So do you have someone who helps you with that, or are you doing it all on your own?
No, so I have a great team of people who we all work probably about quarter time. So between all of us, we make up one full person.
Okay.
And one of the things that I love about the work is, and ergo the name Impact, is that we are able to have an impact in many areas. So, and being able to be a distribution source for local restaurants, that's been great. To be able to provide healthier food options and fresh food in places that don't have it is great. But also, we donate all of our food, uneaten food, to local families. So we restock our machine every 3 days. And so anything that we have to pull on that 3rd day, we donate. And so that's also been a great point of...
That's awesome.
Yeah, of impact.
Good. Yeah, that's great.
Hey everybody, just a quick reminder that this episode is brought to you by Fiore Communications. Just like people, every business has a story to tell, And we've been helping our clients tell their story since 2001, because who you are as a company is just as important as what you do. To learn more about how telling your story can make a difference in your business, visit fiorecommunications.com. Thanks again for listening. Now back to the show.
Okay, shifting gears a little bit. In other ways you're involved in the community. First, let's just start with the chamber, because that's like a whole
Yes.
category into itself, probably. So you were a member of Leadership Tallahassee Class 21.
Yes.
You can go ahead and say it now
The
if you want
best
to.
class ever.
There you go. And you're the immediate past chair of LT.
Yes.
And you're also the chair of the Community and Prosperity Committee.
Yes,
Is that
for the
correct?
chamber.
Right, for the chamber. So why is involvement in the chamber important to you, and how does it help you in your goals to impact the community?
So my introduction to the chamber was, as you have said, was through Leadership Tallahassee. I am a Leadership Tallahassee fanatic, and I went through the program. I think we're on class 38 or 39, and I went through in 21. So it's been a long
It's
time.
like halfway.
Yeah.
now.
Yes. Yes.
Right.
And so I learned a lot about Tallahassee through the program and built relationships, which is not uncommon. But I was also the business community was an area that I wasn't involved in. Government and not-for-profit, it's an area I've been involved in for a long time. So for me, being a part of the chamber kind of goes back to a theme I've mentioned before, and that is kind of being that person in the middle, that voice representing interests at the table that aren't always there.
Right. So tell me about the Community and Prosperity Committee as part of the chamber. What is your goal, and what does the committee do?
So the Community and Prosperity Committee is a brand new committee of the chamber, and it really has been in development for a number of years. The committee is really focused on helping to bring forth solutions to challenges that impact our community through the business community, and kind of shining a light on those challenges and providing business owners and chamber members with opportunities to be a part of the solution. And so we've spent the last several months really talking with stakeholders about the root causes of poverty and how we as a business community can help change those root causes. It's also, really apparent from an economic development standpoint that companies want to come to a community that have certain things, a great educational system, low crime, arts, affordable housing. And so all of those things impact our ability as a community to have a strong economy and jobs. And so our committee is really charged at taking a look at those things and making it a part of the everyday conversation of the chamber, which is relatively new.
Right. So you're involved in many other organizations in the community, many of which focus on women. And those include the Pace Center for Girls, Refuge House, and the Oasis Center for Women and Girls. Why is this such a focus for you and your volunteer time?
So again, it kind of goes back. You do a great job of leading one through how they got here. So
Well,
it kind of goes back. It goes back
well,
to
not everybody has such a clean thread as you, though. You've been very consistent through your life in this, which makes it easy.
So, I mentioned early on the inequities that I saw and that inequities that I experienced. And so
Right.
one of the patterns dealt with the fact that I was a woman. And so there were times when I felt opportunities were impacted because of that. And so for me, it really is about making sure that women and girls have equal opportunity to be the best that they can be and to thrive. And so if a community isn't offering that, or an organization isn't offering that, or a person is making it difficult for a woman to do that, then I'm I'm there. And I want to make sure that I lend my voice to that and advocate for women and girls as a whole, but women individually. I think it's important to, a lot of times you can sit on a board and you can serve and you can, go to a fundraiser and you can write a check. But ultimately, I think change happens one person at a time. And so for me, it's important to not just give back, at a high level, but to give back to individuals. And I do that personally, but also through my work in organizations like those.
Right. And that's probably especially true when girls, some of the organizations, you work with, girls have had to overcome some challenging circumstances. Right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so helping them overcome those circumstances. And then also going back to the fact that in some of their circumstances mirror what I experienced in, my Pensacola life. And when I look back and realize, for an example, that I'd never met a lawyer, let alone a Black female lawyer, although that's what I knew I wanted to do and be. It's important to me to connect with girls and women, almost as an example of, this is possible.
Right.
If I hadn't created this idea in my head, I may not be here. But this, people like me are real, and you can be whatever it is you want to be.
Right. Okay, so we've talked about, women and girls. So I want to talk a minute about the girl who's most important to you,
Yes.
your daughter, who's 13 now, right?
Yes.
So tell us about her.
So, yeah, my daughter is most important to me. She's the most important girl in my life.
That makes sense.
Yeah. So my daughter Chase is 13. She is going to the 9th grade at Lincoln.
That's a big change year for her, right?
It's a huge change year for her. It's the two of us, and we have a dog, Bella, who is a mix between a Dachshund and a Chihuahua. So she's very energetic and outspoken.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Yes. Yeah, my daughter and I are really close, and most of actually everything that I do for her, because I want to make sure, again, that she has opportunities that I didn't, and a lot of the decisions that I've made in raising her relate to that.
Do you talk about your circumstances when you grew up and how that impacted you, and now how that impacts her through you?
I do. I'm not sure she necessarily gets it, but I think that's natural because I talk with her about it. She sees it. And it's important to me, and I think she may get it more now as she matures, but it's been important to me to expose her to all facets of life and different lives, so she could get it, and she can get it. But she's naturally very empathetic, which I think helps her understand the need to give back and also appreciate the life that she's been given.
Right. I just heard a podcast the other day from an athlete talking about how difficult it is to communicate to he was talking about he can't recreate the struggles he went through for his kids. And
Absolutely.
Now they live a life of much more privilege than he did. So it's the challenge of making them understand that, making the children understand that, which is hard.
Yes. Yeah. And making them, or somehow creating an environment. I'm a big fan of the book Grit, and the whole concept of having grit and that being a determinant or a major determinant in one's success. And so just balancing opportunity with privilege and grit, and what comes out of that. But kids aren't a formula, so you
you can have it all figured out and do nothing.
Absolutely.
Right? You've been named to the 25 Women You Need to Know by the Tallahassee Democrat, and you've also been the recipient of numerous awards, including the Pace Setter Distinguished Leadership Award from the Tallahassee Chamber. So what do these kinds of recognitions and awards mean to you?
So I appreciate the recognition, and but I hesitate only from the perspective of the fact that what motivates me is the work, and so I appreciate being recognized. To me, it goes back to me wanting to inspire other women and girls and people of color. And for me, it's not about me personally.
Right.
What's funny, though, is this is a funny story that just happened either yesterday or the day before yesterday. And this puts it into reality. I was with my daughter and we were at a store. She saw a dress that she liked. Tried the dress on. It was a nice dress. It fit. And she said, I don't want it because I don't have any place to wear it. And I said, well, you can, have a dress and wait. And she was like, oh, okay, well, I'll wear it the next time you get an award. I said, well, you don't know if that's going to happen. You may never get a chance to wear the dress. And she was like, no, I'm sure I'll get a chance to wear it.
Yeah, she'll probably get to wear it at some point soon.
So that's the reality, but I don't know.
Well, I did read in an article from the Democrat in 2015 that you said your advice that you would give someone would be to plan your life the best you can, but be flexible. And do you think you've taken your advice on that, and how has that worked out for you?
Yeah, I have. I'm very much a planner, but I do recognize that you really can only plan so much. I am also a woman of faith, and so because of that, what's most important to me is that everything that I do be in the will of God. And so that may be what I have planned or what I may write down or what I may think may be different. And so that's a part of, in some ways, that's a part of the need for flexibility. And so I have been flexible. An example is there have been times, especially early in my career, that I tried to leave Tallahassee. That, when I think back to wanting to be an international corporate attorney or, spending time in New York or having an interest in federal policy issues, Tallahassee wasn't the place for that.
Right.
But every time there was something about Tallahassee, either a professional opportunity, a business opportunity, or a family opportunity that kept me here. And so, yeah, I love Tallahassee now and don't want to be anywhere else.
Right. Is there anything that you enjoy or any hobby you have or something you do that would surprise people?
Probably not. What I enjoy most is sleeping. I love to sleep.
You mean like you would sleep until noon if you could?
No, so I'm an early riser, but I could go to sleep at 8:30, 9 o'clock if I could. And I love to travel. We just got back from LA on vacation. That was my first time there. And it was definitely, it was eye-opening. Great vacation, had a great time, but very eye-opening.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a completely different
world.
Yeah.
Yeah. And of course, for me, what struck me more than anything was the degree of poverty and homelessness was, it was overwhelming.
Were you actually in the city?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And that's because I'm not a good travel planner of all the things that I plan.
Yeah.
And so we actually stayed downtown. I didn't realize that Skid Row and downtown LA were like, the same.
Right. Yeah, well, you learned for your next trip out there, maybe stay outside the city just a little bit.
I know.
Or consult with somebody where a good place to be might be. Or go.
But we had a great time in Santa Monica and did the tours and all that stuff. So
Good. All right, last two questions. All right, so Sha'Ron, looking back, is there one thing or person that you would say altered the trajectory of your life to this point?
There have been a number of people, but I definitely have to say that Dr. Frederick Humphreys had a tremendous impact on the trajectory of my life
He
because
just passed away.
Right. Because of his vision for Florida A&M University and me going there during his presidency and it really being a mecca of Black talent at the time, really has impacted and really impacted my trajectory and my ability to dream and do and know that there's no factor, as a woman of color, as a Black woman, I can do and be anything because he showed us that and gave us really the runway to achieve. And so I definitely would say that he was extraordinarily impactful to who I am.
And you dealt with him directly because you served on the board.
Yeah, so I served with him and worked with him directly as the vice president of student government and also student member of the Florida Board of Regents at the time.
Okay, so I knew about the Board of Regents. We didn't talk about that you were vice president of the
Yes.
student government too.
Yes. I had an opportunity to work really closely with him and so many other great students that came through FAMU at the time.
Right.
Which reminds me, I know, again, this may not make it, but FAMU football is something I'm crazy about. So aside from sleeping.
So changing conferences this year,
Yes.
right, in football, that's a big deal.
That's a big deal. I'm excited about that. I'm excited about the schools that we'll be competing with now as a part of the SWAC. I'm excited about being able to travel to games. I'm excited about Miami and Orlando and Tampa and Atlanta. It's just a great time to be a Rattler. So that excites me.
Great. I'll make sure that part gets in.
Oh, thank you.
Sure. All right, this is the last question, and I appreciate all your time. This podcast is named How I Got Here, and we've talked about how you got to this point in your life. So where do you think here might be for you in 3 to 5 years from now?
3 to 5 years from now, my daughter will be graduating from high school, and I really have not planned my life beyond that. I'm 100% focused on making sure that she gets there and that she is able to begin that phase of her life with all of the opportunities that God has for her. So I don't know. We'll see. I'm excited about the future. I'm excited about Tallahassee, Impact Foods. I'm excited about Gunster. It's a great time, especially coming out of the year that we've just come out of. I'm grateful to be at this point.
That was Sha'Ron James. As she continues to fill gaps, provide access to the vulnerable, and serve our community, I'm sure it won't be too long before her daughter gets to wear that dress. Thanks for listening to the show. You can subscribe at Apple Podcast, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. And while you're there, please leave us a review. It really does make a difference. Thanks to my amazing staff at Fiore Communications, who pick up the slack while I'm working on these podcasts, and to Troy Bloom for composing our theme music. You can hear more of Troy's creations on Facebook and Instagram at Troy Bloom Music. To connect with the podcast or suggest a future guest, follow us on social media or email us at podcast@fiorecommunications.com.